to talk about what's close to my heart. As a pastor, I've been working for 35 years, and I have the best time of my life actually was when I was at the hospital Waldfriede. Often as a pastor, I realized that people are very lonely in society. They are overwhelmed and they feel like they have been left alone. They all hunger, they want to be accepted and they want to be understood. We all are hungry for context and communion. That's not only in our church like this, that's a general rule. When you walk through the streets of Berlin and you look at the faces of the people, you see like they are stressed and they look lonely and frustrated. The insecurity and financial distress is a very big factor, and also the being afraid of the future, mistrust of other people, and it falsifies our reality. And the big question is, where can I find help? It's here in Berlin. Where can I be just a human being in spite of my difficult situation? Who sees me? Who sees me as a human being? And as a pastor, we are not just people that communicate our knowledge about the Bible, but we should be human beings that take care of human beings. People are not interested in what we are saying. They want to know that we care. People don't care about what we are saying until they know that we are caring about them and for them. For us, as a Christian, Jesus is in the center, but Jesus tells very clearly, whatever you have done to the least of us, you have done it to me. When did you look at somebody in the street for the last time? Do you know what his fears are? The fears of your neighbor? When is the last time that you really looked at somebody who you're working with? The most important task we have from God is to take care of our next neighbors. My church was not only my local church, but also the hospital where I was working. There were so many different people, whether they were Christians or atheists, they were all the same to me. I have a special regard for women. I wasn't looking for this task. It came to me. And the only thing I did about this whole task was that I was taking care of people. God has sent me those people, and I want to share with you some of their stories. It all started in the 90s. I was already a pastor, and an old woman told me that she had a problem about which she had talked with nobody. It was when she was very young. It had been 50 years ago, and the Russians were invading her village, and she was raped, and she became pregnant, and she didn't know what to do with this child because it was not the child of her husband. And she was so desperate, and she didn't have any money. So after the birth, she took the baby and she went into the forest, and she left it in the forest. And it means that if you leave a newborn in the forest, it will die. And other women were talking about their pregnancy. Several said, I don't know how I'm going to handle a baby. Not every woman is happy about pregnancy, nor in the hospital either. So in the year 1998, there came an old man to me with a woman who was pregnant, very thinly clad, and they told me that she was a prostitute and that he had getting to know her on the streets. And she was going to have very soon a baby in the next coming days, and they didn't know where she can go. And she was very afraid also that the baby would be taken from her by her pimp and that it would be sold into slavery. And then this old man said, you are a Christian hospital. Can't you help this woman? And I said, of course we're going to help. Of course we'll find a solution. I went straight away to a doctor and I told him the story. And they were waiting in my office downstairs, and I had made them some tea. And I was just hoping I could come back with some good news. But the doctor told me, send them away. We can't keep them. That's illegal. If she doesn't want to say her name, and she didn't want to, then the police will come, and that would be very bad for our reputation as a hospital. So I had to go back to the office. And it was a horrible moment for me to tell them that I had to turn them away. And I saw them walking away, the old man and the young woman. And she had her hands on her belly as if she wanted to protect this child. And I swore to myself, I'm never gonna send away another woman which is in such a distress. But I didn't know how I was going to change things, because all this thing about anonymity and giving birth without doing any paperwork. I'm from Austria, so in Austria, everybody is allowed to know where he is coming from, if this is possible. If this is possible, you have to know your origin. You are allowed to know your origins. But because if it's in Austria, you are allowed to give birth anonymously, but not in Germany. And I think in this situation, every woman should find help. Nothing should be illegal. And I mean, a doctor, he has been sworn in that he will protect her life in whatever circumstances, that he will always help. About a year later, there was a phone call from an acquaintance, and she told me about the first baby hatch that was opened in Hamburg. And I said, what's that? A baby hatch? A baby box? I've never heard about it. And she told me, yes, you can put a baby inside, and it's completely legal, it's in security, and you can just walk away and somebody will take care of the baby. And it's controlled, there's a whole association behind it. There's a whole, everything was also legal with the hospitals, but there was a lot of paperwork involved, so I didn't really understand everything, but the idea stuck. I just thought that's what we need in our hospital. Because we are a hospital that doesn't do abortions. So we say we want to protect life. So I went directly back to this doctor and I said, that's what I want to do. And I had the same answer again. No, it's illegal. It doesn't work out. But we had just there was just a new medical director starting. And he was from Hamburg. And it was a Friday afternoon. I was talking to him. He said, look, Gabi, I've been here only for 2 weeks. I can't already bring in a baby hatch. I was disappointed. But I still thought about the idea. I continued. And then on Monday, the medical director came back and said, okay, I've looked at it. I'm not against it, but who's going to do the work? And I said, oh, I'm going to take care of the work. It can't be that much. And I was very naive, actually, because when you're pioneering something, there's always a lot of work. But I had permission, so I was writing to all the authorities. And I got help from the medical director. I wrote all these letters till we have the green light. But some places, even in the church, people were against it, but they came with arguments that were not really arguments. So in September 2000, we opened our first baby hatch. Does everybody know how a baby hatch works, a baby box? I will shortly explain it. It's a box out of aluminium, which is into a wall, built into a wall. You can open it from the outside. You can put in a child, and there is a camera which shows only the baby, not the mother. There is an alarm, and for 24 hours a day, this alarm is supervised, and we have an alert in the pediatrics, and I get an alarm too. So the nurses go right way down within 2 minutes and take out the baby. And then we also have to do all the paperwork, obviously. We have to have child protection advised. But we work really with the authorities. There is nothing hiding, everything is legal. But never have we followed the mother. She was in security that she could stay out of everything. Now, if you are wondering where these women are coming from, I can just, how old they are, from what, we always thought it would be very teenager moms only, who have their first child and don't know how to handle it. But no, that's not the reality. We also had women, most of them were between 27 and 34 years old. Most of them, it wasn't their first child. It was often the third, the fourth, the fifth, even the sixth child. And the family situation was just, they couldn't handle another child. And most of them were without a husband. They had to work, they had their other small children already, and they didn't have much finances. Even in Germany, there is financial distress. And they thought the whole balance would collapse if they had another child. So that's why they came. So when we started on September 12th in 2000, we opened this baby box against any arguments. Even parts of it were still illegal in Germany then. But we said, our conscience doesn't let us just close our eyes and not give any help to these kind of women who are in these situations. These women come from all social levels. They were just moms, stay-at-home moms, or without judgment. I want to say some were from very simple surroundings, but others were very at ease. One was an owner of a restaurant. They were from all kind of society levels. They were women who sometimes didn't have a lot of culture. Some of them didn't even know Yeah, because the doctors always said, don't people know how you can avoid having babies? But today's every woman has means not to become pregnant. But some people really didn't know. But there was always one subject. They all had one thing in common. It was the fear. They were afraid that the other people would notice. They were afraid of their partners. They were afraid that they would lose their work. They were afraid that they couldn't handle it financially. It was always fear was the main present factor. And I have met hundreds of women in those 15 years. And I can tell you, there were only 2 or 3 women which I thought it's better they didn't become a mom. But all the other women I met, they were wonderful moms. That wasn't the problem. They were just in a situation that wouldn't allow to have another child. And most of them were very small, and you wouldn't even see that they were pregnant. They came, they had size 38, and they left again 38 size. And when they came to us and they gave birth in an anonymous way, they were not allowed to take the baby with them again. You couldn't just leave with the baby. Because you have to give to this baby a good start and a good future. That is legal in German, that's the law. And there are some women, they didn't even realize that they were pregnant until the last moment, just before birth. And we always were wondering, how could this happen? I mean, these babies were moving in the belly. But people just said, I thought I had gas, I had something else in my belly. They didn't realize they were pregnant. So the phenomena is what you don't want to see, you won't see it and you won't realize it. And one woman said she was going shopping for clothes, and there were a lot of mirrors everywhere, so you could watch your clothes. And something fell down, and she picked it up. And when she came up, she looked in the mirror, and she suddenly realized there is a pregnant lady standing there. And just a few hours later, she came to us and she gave birth to the baby. She realized she just hadn't been looking at herself from head to toe. She only looked in the mirror where she only could see her face. But she was very happy that she was helped when she gave birth. Because you never know what happens with a baby when they give birth all by themselves and the woman is desperate. She doesn't know what she's doing. And then they try that the child shouldn't be crying so nobody can hear it. And it just can happen that the baby dies and it wasn't even premeditated. We also had women came with children who were already dead. And we were glad at least we could help them because they were so desperate. They didn't want to kill the baby and we could protect them. They didn't have to go to prison. And we could help them psychologically. Or they were so traumatized, they really needed help because that's something you don't forget your whole life. You can't handle it all by yourself. You need psychological help. And you wouldn't know it, but it can be very close to you. It can be a colleague at work. It can be your neighbors. It can be somebody at school. And you just see she's bizarre or she's a little different, but you won't see that she's maybe pregnant. So we had a very young girl. She came at 6:30. I got a telephone call, come into the hospital fast. We have a young girl and she must have had her baby, but she doesn't remember anything. And I went there and I talked to her and she said, I had my periods very strongly. She was 16 years old. And I asked her, is it possible you had a child? And she said, no, I wouldn't know that. I mean, what are you talking about? But as a fact, her mother, we called her mother, and we asked her to look if there was a baby somewhere in the apartment. And the child was found under her bed. And months afterwards, she still didn't know consciously that she had been pregnant and had a baby. She wasn't psychologically disturbed or anything, but just everything that was related to the pregnancy, she just had blacked it out completely. So these are things, as a pastor, you know a little bit how to handle it, but there are a lot of problems coming when you do this kind of work. You have a lot of different situations. And I always say the main factor in our work is the human factor. They are people and they are loved by God just as much as we are loved. We also have our problems and we also have our fears, just like them. They are no different. They are just so desperate and they need help so much, and Jesus is there for them too. 260 women that came to our hospital over the last 15 years. From these 260, 1/3 have kept their children. They gave birth in our hospital and then they kept their children. Because afterwards, when they felt that they were not alone, they suddenly had the courage to keep their children, and we didn't leave them alone. We helped them, went to the authorities, we helped with work, we helped with an apartment and everything. And from the 260 women, or 260 cases, 25 of the children were in the baby hatch. And even from there, from the baby hatch, some women came back. And the others were just giving birth in the hospital in an anonymous way. And often they gave us afterwards their name. Some women left and they only gave the name years later. So just last summer, I had a woman who called me. Can you remember? I had a child in your clinic years and years ago, and I didn't give you my name. But now I want to know how my girl is doing. And I said, of course, no problem. We work with an adoption agency and you can call there. Maybe you even want to get to know your daughter. You can meet her. Maybe your daughter wants to meet you. And she said, no, I don't have the courage. I'm sure she will hate me. And I said, no, I don't think so. Because all the adoptive parents, they are very open to know who is the birth mother. Because they are all very thankful. They are thankful to the birth mother. And so I asked the adoptive parent and everybody agreed. And just to make the whole story short, they had contact together and they got to know each other. At least on the phone. I don't know if they have met each other, but Everything is always very transparent. We try to encourage the truth and openness. 95% of all the women didn't stay anonymous. I never thought that so many women finally would give their name, because I often heard, yeah, there will be a lot of people coming and they just want to get rid of their babies and they will never give their name. And I just thought, how crazy are people? This is ridiculous. Because there is always a relationship between mother and baby. It's the strongest relationship that exists. Not even with a partner, you have a relationship as you have with your own child. So this is just the strongest connections that exists on the earth. And I think it's wonderful that only 5% didn't give their name. But the children are fine even of those 5%. It's not most important to know where you're coming from, but to know that you are loved. There are so many prejudices against these women, that they are bad mothers. We have a special expression. They are called sluts. We call them sluts. People who have bad morals. Or they're called monsters. Even in our hospital, there were some midwives who said, those women who can just separate themselves from their children, they must be monsters. And some say, well, don't they know there is protection, or there is even abortion? I mean, but all the women and all the children I knew are just wonderful people. I don't have own children, but those are my children. I have a lot of children because most of them I knew over the years, and I still have contact with them. I see them growing. The oldest, the first baby now is 24 years old. She was only about 3 pounds when we found her, 3 pounds of life. And she has become a wonderful young woman. And she wouldn't have survived if there wasn't a baby box. She would have died from cold. I just would like to give you some examples. And Gabi asked me what were the cases I think were really touching, because I had read her book about the baby hatch. Gabriela has written a book about it. So in this book, I talk about 2 kinds of mothers. It's the belly mom, the one who had the child, and it's the heart mom. So the mom of the belly and the mom of the heart. That's how they talk also in the families about the 2 moms. It's more usual to have 2 dads, but we have 2 moms. So I give you a few examples. Examples I also talk about in my book. It was on a Monday in December. I had a phone call in the middle of the night. Please come quickly, there is a baby in the baby hatch. And it was a horrible year this year because we had 3 dead babies. We had a baby that had been murdered with a knife and put in the baby hatch. We had another baby that was found in the toilets. And another baby that had been found in a garden under a ping pong table. And I was so discouraged. I was very much criticized in this year by the whole public, by newspapers. So it was a hard year for me, but God doesn't make any mistakes. And after this hard year, we had so many healthy, wonderful babies afterwards. So everything turned around. But this was the first baby that was coming after all these terrible events. And I jumped out of my bed, I drove, I burned all the red lights, and I was always so excited when they called me in the middle of the night. And when I came, there was the most beautiful little boy I had ever seen. He had blue eyes, very clear hair, and he was really pretty. And I really fell in love with him. And if I could have, I would have adopted him right away. But then other people said, no, you can't adopt the baby. Who is doing the work? So I would often take the babies and I would carry them around. During the day, I would spend a lot of time in the nursery. And also the other nurses would take special care of them. And then on Friday, there was another phone call. And somebody said, we gave him the name Thomas, this baby. And then there was a phone call to say that the parents of Thomas were here and that they cannot live without this baby, that they were here to get him back. And then I said, okay, what are we going to do now? Yeah, okay. I wanted to see them right away the next day. And I was a little stressed because I didn't know, is that now the right thing to do? But I told them, come. And the next morning, there were two very young people coming in. They had just started their professional life. They had their first job. She was still in school. And they came and they were hardly dressed. I mean, they were shivering. I said, please sit down. And I asked them if they would like to hold their baby. And you saw the child was the spitting image of his mom. And the dad said, yes, can I hold him? And she as soon as she held the baby, the mom, all the milk was coming out. She had stains on her blouse, and that was just the best sign. This is the real mother. But I mean, nobody would come and lie about this. Who wants to go and get a baby that's not his own? And they told me that she only knew 2 days before she gave birth that she was pregnant. And a doctor said, oh, it's going to come in another 2 months. And they didn't do an ultrasound. So he just looked at her and said, yeah, I guess you'll have it in about 2 months. So they went home and they didn't know what to do. And they had the whole weekend. They said, what can we do? We don't have the money for a child. They could just hardly pay their rent and their food. And then the young man said, I think we should give the child to adoption. We'll see right away what are the solutions, because for the child it's not fair. So when she gave birth, they were so desperate, and he went working and she went to work, and she was so tired and sad at the thought that she was not going to be able to keep this baby she was going to have. And then suddenly she had such pains, and she thought there was something wrong. She had to read something wrong, but then suddenly she realized, no, she was having her baby. And it was in her own bathroom. Very fast, that the baby was born. And she didn't know what to do. So she just put everything into a towel, the child, and put it in the bathtub. And there it's warm. So at least it was okay for the baby because the bathroom is the warmest room in the house normally. So she was just sitting in the kitchen the whole day until her partner came home. And he looked at her and he said, what happened? And she said, go to the bathroom. And he went to the bathroom and he saw the towel in the bathtub. And he said, I was so scared, I didn't even want to look. But then he took off the towel and there was the little Thomas. And he had his hand in his mouth and he was completely very quiet. And we always see with those children that they are always very silent, very quiet, as if they knew they have to be. So they decided, okay, we're going to put it in the baby hutch. So they came to Berlin and the policeman showed them that's where you have to go. And he showed them the way. And then they went back home and their parents realized something is wrong. Why are you so sad? Why are you not talking? What happens? So they told their own parents, this young couple. And the grandmother said, you go and get my grandchild back immediately. You can't leave my grandchild somewhere just at the hospital. So the whole family pitched in and they said, of course, we want this baby. And they came back, they got their little Thomas, they got married, and they brought him up. And he knows his story. Thomas today knows this whole story, how desperate they were, how he has been for a few days at this hospital, and how he was taken back. And he's a very balanced young man today. So this story was told afterwards in the news because it was just around Christmas time. So this baby became a little famous because he was the baby of the miracle of Christmas. And 2 years later, there was another news article about this baby 2 years later, and the whole world, it was in the whole newspaper in the whole world. And this led to baby hatches all over the world, even in China. In China, they want to put in every village a baby hatch because a lot of children are just thrown away in nature. And our journal Stern in Germany has written an article about it. In China, some babies are just thrown out on the street. But it's a very, very old problem in China. Or even, we find a biblical example. In Ezekiel, there's the story of this baby that is found in its blood, just in a ditch. And God talks to this baby. You should live. And Lord picked it up and cleaned it and said, you will live. So this whole problem is as old as humanity. I had a young woman. She came to me. We only knew each other about the internet. We communicated on internet and phone. And she told me, I'm in my 6 months now, or 7. I've been raped. It was somewhere where I never go, so I don't know the word now. I'm in a discotheque, dancing. So she was in a dancing club, and when she went home around midnight, she was followed, and the man raped her. And she went home, and she buried herself. She really had a hard time with the whole situation. Then she realized she was pregnant. And she didn't have a partner. And she said, I didn't have any other sexual contact. The child can only come from this rape. And I told her, come and see me. And she said, I can only come next week. I still have to see my mother first. It's her birthday. And I have to go to another country. And it's a country where there's not so good medical care. She thought she could still hide it, that she was pregnant, but the mother saw it right away. And she said, you are pregnant and you're not going to keep this baby. But the young girl always said, I'm not pregnant. No, no. And I communicated with her all the time. But there was such an excitement with her mother and everything that the contractions started. And I always told her, you have to go to a hospital. You bring yourself in danger, the life of yourself and your child. And she had a child, a very small child. And I said, bring the child back. I have prepared everything for adoption. But she didn't want to see the baby. And then we talked, and she said, okay, I will at least look at the child. And then she said, okay, I'll bring it back to Germany. And she called me when she was back. And oh wow. She called me, and when she went back to her room after the call, the baby was dead. During those 5 minutes of the phone call, the baby had just died. And the young girl, she was completely desperate because she hadn't realized how much she had loved this baby, even that she didn't want to have it. And women that said before, I'm not going to have this baby, I'll give it for adoption, while they were giving birth, they completely changed their mind. And they would say, I keep it, I still keep my baby. As soon as they get help and the fear is gone, suddenly love can break through. And they realize how much they love this child already. I was so much criticized, but I can only tell you, those prejudices, they are not true. And even it was a hard time for me, it was the best time of my life to meet these precious women. And it's a wonderful thing to save life. And this is preaching the gospel, to protect life. And when we take care of those people who are so destitute, that's when we live the gospel. And when all we need to say is, I am here. I do what I can. And people ask me, why did they trust you? And I always said, I was just there for these women. I was just walking them through the pregnancy, walking through the birth. I never left them alone. Even when there were different nurses or midwives, different shifts, I was with them all along, so they didn't have to re-explain their whole story each time again. So I always talked to the nurses and the midwives, but there were only very few women that didn't trust. And some nurses said they are monsters, because there was one woman, they lived in the street, and I went into the hospital, and she was giving birth. She came in the very last minute, and the child was already coming out. She had been phoning around in whole Berlin the whole day, asking where she could give birth in an anonymous way. And finally she had found us. One midwife from another hospital told them, go to Waldfriede, they will take you. And she came at the very last minute. And she was sitting there with the child in her arm. And she said, my little angel, I love you, my little angel, but you know, I cannot keep you. Where I'm going, there I cannot take you. But I'm sure you will have very loving parents. And the nurse, the midwife, she was one of my critics. She always said, these women are monsters. And she was standing there. And she had always said, Bobby, I don't understand you. How can you deal with those women? But this night she was there. She looked at this woman and she started crying. And the midwife said, I really always thought they were monsters, but they are not monsters, they are mothers. And this midwife only realized at this moment, these are all mothers. And this woman gave her baby to the midwife. And then she got dressed again and she looked very neglected. You saw that she was living in the streets. She had sores everywhere. And then she got up and she left. And I gave her my phone number just before she left. And I said, you can call me anytime. And you can always ask about the baby. So she left with her bags. And the next time I got a phone call and nobody was talking. But then there was only one question. How is she doing? And then I knew, okay, this is this woman. And I said, oh, she's doing fine. The baby's doing fine. Come and have a look at her. And she came with her 2 old shopping bags. She took the baby. She changed the diapers. She fed it. She sang some songs for 2 hours. And then she left again with her shopping bags. And I said, you can stay. But she said, no, I have to go. So for a whole week, it was always like that. She came every day, and every day she spent 2 hours. And after a week, I had to go to the authorities and tell them there was a new baby. So I went, announced it, and I came back, and the lady was there again. And I told her, I've been to the authorities. And I said, would you trust me and tell me your story? She was from Germany, 600 kilometers away from Berlin. And she had been living in the streets for 10 years because she had left home. Her husband was very well known, but he abused her sexually, physically, emotionally. He really, really abused her every single day in every way. He humiliated her. And to the outside, there was the perfect facade. I mean, he had a good job and nobody knew about anything. And one night she just left without anything. And she came to Berlin and she lived on the streets. Some people took her in for a little while, but she became pregnant again. She was almost 40 years old. She became pregnant. But she didn't want to have an abortion. She had other children that she had left with her husband. And she said, I can never go back. I can never go back to my husband. I can never go back to my other kids. So it was a horrible story. I was very sad hearing it. And sometimes you just have to be silent. I didn't say much. I just was sitting with her silently. And I asked her. So I'm not going to tell her name, but I give her the name Jordi. And I asked her, don't you want to be with your daughter? She said, yes, I would love to be with her, but I can't. I said, and if I have a place for you, a place, an apartment, and if you get help, would you do it? And for a very long time, she didn't say anything. And then she said, yes, I would love to. So I called Star Park, this place where they gave a home to teenagers and taught them how to be moms, the whole association. So I called the responsible, and she said, okay, yeah. The responsible one said, how old is then the teenie? And I said, well, the teenie is 40 years old. And the director laughed and said, oh, we'll come and get her anyway. So the same day they came, they got the mother and the child. And I said, where are your things? And she said, they're standing there, these 2 plastic bags. These are all the things I have. Nothing else. Those 2 carrier bags. Since then, I can't look at shopping bags in the same way. So she really got help. She got help. She got divorced. She could see her first children. She had left again. She really started a new life. So I was glad I was working with other places who could follow up and give those women a completely new life. And after 6 months, Yodis came back to visit. And there was one sentence that stays with me. Bobby, I've never been as strong as I am today. And for me, that was a very important sentence. I realized I could help people to become strong and independent. How much time do I still have left? So one lost story. Is that okay with everybody? Another story? In all those years, I never knew whether I would sleep through the night or not, because very often I had phone calls in the middle of the night. And people said, Gabi, please come. There's a woman here or there's a baby here. So I always went to the hospital. When I was younger, it was easier. Later, it was a little harder to get up in the middle of the night. But the night nurses, they make the best coffees I've ever had. So I think nurses live from coffee. So one day, it was on a Wednesday, I was very tired. I went to bed because I hadn't slept the night before. There was one birth after another. Sometimes everything is at the same time. So there was a lot going on. And while I was taking off my shoes, the nurse called and said, I'm sorry, Gabi, but there's a woman here and she only wants to talk to you with nobody else. So I put my shoes back on and I went back to the hospital. And it was a beautiful, beautiful woman, long black hair, probably around 38 years old, very good looking, really beautiful silhouette, very well dressed. And you could hardly see that she was pregnant. You just could see it at the ankles. And she cried and cried. And I asked her, how can I help you? And she told me her story. She said, I can't tell you more. I'm just pregnant. I need your help. And we realized, yeah, she was already starting with contractions. And so we do all the necessary medical stuff. She was very pale and a little panicked. And she said, I'm so glad I get help here. And and she said, if I don't we lived through the birth. In my handbag, there's my passport and everything. I don't want you to have any administrative difficulties. And I said, of course you're going to survive this birth. Look, you are here. You have the nurses, the doctor. We will help you. You will survive this birth. And she became weaker and weaker and weaker. And also the pulse of the baby became always weaker. And then we decided to do a cesarean. I mean, usually we don't like to do that, and we know the women don't like it either. And so we always try to do our best, but then we said it's necessary. So I told her, don't you want to tell me your story before we do that? And she said, yes, I'm going to tell you. 9 months ago, she was on the Congress in another country, and it was a wonderful Congress. She learned a lot. She's a successful businesswoman. And there was a man also participating in the Congress, and he was looking very good looking, very cultured, very nice. And in the evening, we all went out to eat together, and they had he invited her, but she said, "Yeah, I'll come." But he went with her to her hotel, and when they went to her hotel room, she said, "Please wait for me here." But he forced his way into her hotel room, and he raped her for 2 hours, and she thought she was gonna die. And then he just got dressed and walked downstairs again as if nothing had happened. And she was still for 2 days at this Congress, but she didn't dare to go down back to the assembly. She said she was really looking bad. And I asked her, why didn't you go to the police? And she said, they wouldn't have believed me. They would have told me it was my fault. I had done something to invite him or something. So I'm almost 40 years old. I thought I'm not going to be pregnant, so there are not going to be any consequences. So finally, after several months, I realized, yes, I am pregnant. She had a great job. And then 2 months before she gave birth, she left her job and took a little apartment in Berlin because she knew she wanted to come to Waldfriede for the birth. And she said, in my whole apartment, there are everywhere little papers with your phone number on it. I had read all the newspapers about you, I have all the articles I collected at home. So I knew I wanted to come to your place, hoping that you will help me. But if I die, I wanted you to know how this child came about. And at this moment, she has a phone call. And she said, that's my daughter. She already had an adult daughter. And the daughter said, Mama, where are you? I'm looking for you everywhere. I'm standing in front of your door and you're not at your apartment. Where in the world are you? And she said, I'm at the clinic. Well, but what happened? Why are you in a hospital? And then she gave me the phone and said, can you please tell my daughter what's going on? So I told the daughter, your mom is having a baby. And this daughter, she completely fell apart. She was desperate. A child, this is not possible. She was completely stunned. I mean, why don't I know about anything? My mom wasn't pregnant. How can this be? I'll come right away. Tell me where she is. And then she came. And I had 2 problems suddenly. I had a woman who was having a baby, and I had a completely panicked daughter. And just when she arrived, the mom was rolled into surgery where we did the cesarean. And they only could just say hello for a second. And she had the baby, a pretty young boy. And they both held him. They said goodbye to him. The mother said, it's not good for the baby because he will always remind me of these horrible moments. I would like him to have a family where he is loved and where nobody thinks of these terrible moments that his father inflicted on me. So they give him to adoption agency, and he's doing very well too. So there are stories for hours of wonderful examples. The baby hatch is now a worldwide phenomenon. In every country there are baby hatches now for more security for children and women. Because some babies you find, but there are lots and thousands of babies you don't find because it's very easy to hide a little newborn. They are not bigger than a cat and you can bury them anywhere. But now we talk much more about it. There's much more written about it in the newspapers. People are aware of the problem. And I think this is wonderful because we need this protection for the ones who are the weakest in our society. And in the 25 years that this baby hatch is existing in Waldfriede, that's a fourth of a century. Everybody told me, you will see, in a few months it will be closed again. But there are always people who don't believe in things. But we've been around for 25 years, and those critics, well, they are a minority. The majority thinks baby hatches are a wonderful thing. But the minorities always talk louder. And that's why sometimes. But now, today, we think that even children who don't know who are their father and their mother, they have a right to live like everybody else. And just yesterday, I had visitors. Two of my children came with their adoptive parents. Because I cannot follow those children and those women and families all the time. I have to leave them in peace. But yesterday, I've seen them. I hadn't seen them for the last 10 years when I gave them away. And they came, both of them, to see me with their parents, 10 years old and 12 years old. And the little girl, she always came and she followed me into the kitchen. And she just took me in her arms and held me and said, you have to come and see me. You could come and spend vacation with us. And I don't think that the parents would be very happy to have me in vacation, but it was very touching. It's always touching when I see children. Because I have these adult children who say today, we are so thankful that there was the baby hatch because I wouldn't be alive today. And there is a joy and a thankfulness of those children that they are alive. So I just ask you to think about the subject again. When you think those are bad mothers, they are neglecting their children, no, that's not the reality. They are afraid, they are sometimes young, and they don't know what to do. But all the stories in my book they show those are good mothers. And I still have more stories. Maybe I'll write the second book. I think we should protect those baby hatches, because we have now the whole problem with the migrants, which have their babies in toilets, public toilets, which they leave them in public parks. I think it's still going to be a subject more than ever. How can we be there and protect those newborn children? Life is precious, no matter in what circumstances these children are born. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for this occasion to explain more about this work.